And tonight we are joined by Liz from Harvard's Project Zero. We are extremely lucky to have her join us tonight. She is the co-director there, and she is working on a project out of Eat and Learn, which she will share with us tonight. Her research is related to young people and their understanding of culture, migration, and how those things are interconnected, and public memory. So we're thrilled that she can join us tonight. At the end, we will be giving away a copy of her book, Inquiry Driven Innovation, a practical guide to supporting school-based change, and also another book also from a researcher at Project Zero, Making Thinking Visible, Practices to Engage and Empower All Learners. So without further ado, I am going to pass this over to Liz.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It is Sorry about that. I'm busy here trying to line up my PowerPoint and I accidentally hit mute while I was doing it. Well, welcome to this session. I'm really excited to be here. I love nothing more than really being in conversation with practitioners in the classroom. I myself was a history teacher. You may detect from my accent, I did not grow up in the US, so I actually taught in London and then for a few years in Australia before I ended up living in the United States. I'm going to try and keep this session pretty practical. I'll be sharing some resources in the platform, in the chat there. But I'm just really happy to have the opportunity to share what I and my colleagues have been doing and to share some examples of student work that I hope you'll find interesting. Just want to note we're kind of living in quite turbulent times right now, so I hope everybody's doing okay. In some ways, what I'm going to share might go, wow, what we need now is looking at kind of world events, misinformation, there may be a whole bunch of topics on your mind. But I hope that this idea that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight with some strategies about getting young people to really talk and listen to one another might actually be extremely timely, given the time that we're living in right now. So I am now going to try and share my screen, and I hope that you'll be able to see it. Okay. Shauna, are we good? Are people seeing that?
Yes, could you put it in presenter view?
That would be good. There we are. All right. Okay. Now, you might note that there are two names on here, and it is possible that Everardo may be able to join us, but unfortunately something's come up. He needs to be at the airport. He wasn't sure that he would be able to join. So the two of us prepared this together. We do a lot of this work together. Everardo's Mexican Spanish, a visiting scholar at Project Zero, and so I'm representing his work, and those are my colleagues too. And we called this session Slow Down, Share Stories, Make Connections, which are three key principles I'm going to be kind of sharing through the work today. Strategies for making history education more relevant and engaging for all students. The idea is that we're trying to create opportunities in classrooms for students in your classroom, whatever their background, family, their story, what have you, to find little, not the entire curriculum by any means, but little spaces in the curriculum for them to come and share what might be meaningful to their families and their communities. Right. So several goals is to try and get you to explore some of the things we've been working on. In terms of kind of conveying what we've been doing, we are going to kind of do a very adapted activity such that we've been using on the platform we've created. And then we're going to look very closely at student work and try out something we called the Dialogue Toolkit. And then there'll be time to reflect and connect what I've been sharing to your own practice. And I've promised time for Q&A, which I think will be one of the funner parts. So just a word about the name of the work I'm going to share. So for 10 years, I've been co-directing a project called Out of Eat and Learn. And that's the logo that you see there at the top of the screen. It has a curious name because this project started as an experimental learning space to accompany the walk around the world by a National Geographic explorer called Paul Salopek, and his project is called the Out of Eden Walk. Now, he's currently in China. He's set off from Ethiopia 10 years ago and is literally walking around the world, reporting on the state of the world, engaging in slow journalism. And we're still in very close contact with Paul. And there's a great deal of synergy between the aims of his walk around the world and what we're trying to do as educators. I think I have a slide coming up. But we're in the process now of kind of rethinking the name and, if you like, the structure of what we do. So we're transitioning right now to a new name, which is the Open Canopy, and that's our new logo there. You're getting a sneak preview because it's not really out in the world yet. And the idea is to have something that doesn't feel so tied to one person's journey around the world. And the structure will be that some of our curricula will be related to the walk and others will not. And then just in terms of a canopy, it's supposed to imply connectedness amongst students within classrooms, but also across classrooms. And then in terms of forestry, open canopies where there are kind of gaps and shafts of light can come through. They're the ones that have the greatest biodiversity, and kind of the different colors connote that a lot of the work we do is to try and create conversations amongst students that may not happen without a light structure in place. The work I'm sharing is very international. We've worked with over 70 countries at this point, but the techniques that I'm going to share you can use in a single classroom. I will be telling you how you can sign up to have your classes connect with other classes around the world, but it's not an essential part of what I'm going to share. This is the platform that we created. So I just point this out. It's still called Out of Eden Learn if you were to Google, and at the end we will put all the links for you to go and explore. But I just want to point out with those tabs, you can find all of our curriculum. They're completely free. You can commodify, adapt, try out some of the activities if you like. We have community guidelines and tools. I'll put some links in the chats. We've got videos. There's a lot of different things on here that you can explore in publications, what have you. And that's also where you would go if you did want to sign up, because you sign up classes for free from our homepage. This is just to give you a few images of kids in action. So the Out of Eden Learn as a platform, people sign up their classes, and then we group classes into what we call them walking parties because of our connection to the Explorer. But they're really learning groups where we put 5 or 6 classrooms together. And we've got an algorithm that tries to make those pairings as diverse as possible. So people who are located in different parts of the world, different socioeconomic backgrounds, rural schools with urban schools, suburban schools, etc. It is a safe, password protected platform. Students then go on learning journeys of between 6 to 12 weeks, and we offer 4 to 6 activities per journey. The one that I'm going to share with you today, called Remembering the Past, ? Has 4 main activities. And so it takes about 8 to 10 weeks, depending on timing. Each activity is broken down into 3 parts. We're going to explore some of that in a moment. And then, as I mentioned, we have created over the years some structures, supports, and tools, resources that can help students to get the most out of the experience. Okay. So this is just a visual of how this works. So people sign up on the platform, and then we've got the curriculum there, if you like, or the learning group in the middle. And then students literally from around the world kind of get connected with us. We do try and keep the ages of the students as close as possible. So middle schoolers would be with other middle schoolers, or whatever the equivalent would be in the country, high schoolers with high schoolers. We have actually had really young kids take part in Out of Eden Learn, as young as 3 or 4, but there the teacher really mediates what's happening. Whereas the work I'm going to share with you tonight involves kids posting for themselves on our platform. They're using a pseudonym, so not their real name, and they kind of don't show pictures of themselves. And the curriculum, which has been designed for history and social studies classrooms, we ask that slightly older kids take this one. So I think the youngest would be like 12, possibly. We've had 11-year-olds, but it's aimed for 12 and up. It seems I did take out the picture of our journalist, so you'll just have to imagine Paul Salopek on a National Geographic with the yellow cover striding out across the world. But if anybody's interested, if you were to look up the Out of Eden Walk, there's actually an incredible website put together by National Geographic, but separate to their main website. And there you'll see in the archives some beautiful writing. Every 100 miles, he stops, interviews the nearest living human being, asks them who they are, where they're coming from, and where they're going. He's documented the sky, the land. He takes these short videos looking slowly at where he is. So it's really an incredible resource for what's been going on in the world and documenting kind of a foot level journey. Some have compared it a bit to Herodotus, the father of modern history, this idea of really trying to walk around the world and understand how we've got to where we are. Now, over the years, we have distilled and kind of worked out what a pedagogy basically for fostering thoughtful, mostly intercultural, but within a classroom interactions amongst students. And we are on the cusp of publishing a free ebook. People can sign up if they'd like me to send you a copy when it comes out, where we share the kind of, I guess, the practices we've distilled. And this book will be really nicely designed, and it's got lots of examples of student work that might serve as inspiration. And the key pedagogic principles that run through all of our work, which you'll see tonight, the first one is this idea of slowing down to observe the world carefully, but also to listen attentively to others. Now, Paul Salopek is trying to walk around the world doing slow journalism. In this case, we're really inviting young people to kind of look with fresh eyes at where they live, the communities that they're in. And then whilst they're in that mode of re-examining their own culture, their own lives, their own communities, that is a very, I guess, thought-provoking moment to then be learning about the lives of kids in other countries, say India, Australia, Ghana, who are also similarly in that process of really slowing down. So that's that idea of slowing down runs across everything. My colleague, Shari Tishman, who works with me at Project Zero, which is a research center, she's an expert actually on working in museums and art galleries. She has a beautiful book called Slow Looking, and she really brought that to this project. And I've been surprised about how eager young people are for these moments that we create where they really get to slow down in ways that, their busy lives may not allow for usually. So that's been a powerful part of the pedagogy. The second key principle is this idea of sharing or exchanging stories. So our curriculum activities really invite young people to share something that's meaningful to them, or tell a story about their family or their community. In terms of making connections, we are interested in kids making connections to one another, but we're also interested in how young people can make connections between their own lives and bigger human stories. And that might mean historical stories over time, something that I'm really interested in as a history teacher. But it might also be making connections to stories that are unfolding in the world today. We're in a very globalized world. So how are stories that are happening at a global level, how are they playing down at the local level? How are we as human beings tapped into different systems or forces that are at play in the world today? Fourthly, and this is kind of very connected to what I've just said, we create a space in our curriculum where it's actually the young people who are generating the content. So yes, we offer a curriculum, and we have some resources to kind of get kids inspired or thinking before they do an activity. But the real meat of this is an opportunity for young people, wherever they may be, to generate content that feels personally relevant and meaningful to them, and for the kids to essentially be teaching one another. Obviously, you might imagine there are maybe some puzzles around that, which I will share at the end. And then the final piece is this thoughtful peer-to-peer exchange connected to sharing stories, where we've developed the dialogue toolkit to try and structure things so it goes beyond maybe what might be a typical social media type interaction, where we're trying to set the stage for kind of a deeper conversation to happen. I might note that the teachers sometimes organize this, but the kids aren't necessarily talking to one another in real time. That's because we're a research project and there are lots of restrictions on us not knowing the real identities of the kids. But it's also because of the time differences. We're a really international project, and so it's actually much easier for teachers to create these opportunities for engagement across classes if we're using a social media type platform where you can post your work. This is just a quick overview of the curriculum that we developed for history classrooms. I'll be sharing the full thing at the end. But just to say, as with all of our curriculum, we really start with a very easy entry point that we think all students will be able to engage with at some level. And so that first footstep, as we call it, is personal ways of remembering the past, which we frame extremely broadly, given that children may have very different life circumstances, but something that they can pick up on in their community, their family, their home, or wherever it is they're living, that maybe dates to before they were born, which if you're 14, 15, 16 is actually quite easy. You're going to have a go in a minute, and that might be a little harder depending on your age. But they come and share, and I'll give you some examples of the kinds of things that young people have shared with us. They then branch out from that, which is very personal, to taking walks in their neighborhoods, slow walks, not just charging around, but really trying to look in new ways at how the past is publicly remembered in the places where they live, and sharing that. And there may or may not be kind of resonance with what they personally share. We then get them, as in all of our learning journeys, actually, to talk with somebody from a different generation, to really listen to their perspective. And in this case, hear how that person thinks the past should be publicly remembered where they live. In the US context, and we offer this to all students, but it's been quite resonant in the US, we suggest, but do not insist, that if the students want to ask about their opinions on controversial monuments, for example, and whether or not they should be taken down or left intact, this is a good opportunity to kind of get different perspectives on some current debates that are going on. And then finally, in publicly remembering the past today, students have choices, but a key one is how might they create a new monument that would be relevant for their communities, or adapt one that's already there? Or how might they argue the case for the way that history is remembered in their community to be changed? So that kind of gives you a little sense of the arc that we invite students to go on. As I said, that embodies, in the details of this slowing down, sharing stories, making connections, students generating content, and thoughtful peer dialogue. All right, so we're going to break things up, from you just listening to me here, and we're going to try out that first activity in a very brief fashion, but just to give you a taste. Did have to just change things up a bit because I mistakenly thought there might be breakout rooms, but it's not a problem. We are going to do it all together and use the chat. So this is taken from our platform here, and the idea is that you would, if we had the time, you would go for a little walk around your house or where you live or in your community if you don't have a fixed place to live. And the idea is you'll find something that shows the past before you were born and how it's remembered in your family or home or community. And in our instructions, we try to frame that as broadly as possible. So it could be an object or a tradition, could be a family photo or a painting, piece of jewelry, an anniversary, a special recipe, piece of furniture, book, tradition or practice, pretty much anything. I do want to put this note in here. You know, your young people in your classrooms presumably come, you know, from a variety of backgrounds. And some students, you know, there'll be difficult history either in their community, going back, or in their particular family. We have done this with many students at this point, and we've had very positive feedback from kids about doing this. But I just say this, that if you're going to go and try this tomorrow morning with your kids, you just want to make sure it's framed as loosely as possible so that kids are really in control about what they choose to share. And I think that is one of the beauties here. Nobody's forcing a kid to talk about race or ethnicity or their family's migration story, for example, if they don't want to. But if they do want to, this can be a very cool opportunity for them to bring that to the classroom. So we're all going to pause for a minute. I'm just I'm going to my little timer on. We'll do, time can go slowly on here, so I'll just do it like 45 seconds or so, where I want you to think, wow, if I was asked to do this, and we do actually do this with teachers as well as students sometimes, what would I be bringing? What would I be bringing from my house to share? And if you don't have anything in your house from before you were born, maybe imagine something that might be here, because we're not going to know if this is, if you really have it in your possession or not, or if it's a tradition. That might be easier because you don't need to obviously be able to get your hands on an object. So we'll just take a moment for people to do that thought experiment. What would you bring? All right. Oh, and I can see people have already put, that's terrific. Okay, I was going to say, and I was going to invite people to share in there. So people have already started posting because you are proactive, and that is great. So if people want to, if you have posted already, I invite you to look at other people's as they're coming in. And I myself will read here, but we'll just give people a moment. Yeah. Okay, and I'll just note we've got some really interesting ones in here already. Playing cards, photo albums. Kim, I appreciate you sharing that. I think absolutely. I'll also say in our work, I think there's so many lessons to be learned from Indigenous communities and how they really keep the past alive in their communities. Newspaper articles, china, a wedding present, old magazines, pictures of parents from, you know, their childhoods. Oh, and here we're into the food. I'll show you in a minute. That food is very popular, we've found. Great. I have to admit, I'm not quite sure what goulash is. Or oyster pudding for that matter. Napkin holder from a time when family members lived overseas in Africa. Ration book from World War II. Wow, that's right, piece of furniture. Right, I think I'm getting the sense from here, both that we can see already in this group, there's a great variety of things, and we have found this to be true every time we've done this with young people. And I'm also getting the sense, I could be wrong, but many of you are quite happy to share or kind of eager to share. And it's also kind of interesting to see what people are sharing. And we're strangers, I've never met you before, but it's my understanding many of you know each other and are probably learning something new about one another, or thinking, oh yeah, next time we meet, I'll ask more about that. If we were at a live workshop, I'd be having you in twos or threes, really spending 2 minutes just listening to somebody talking about what it is that they brought to the proverbial table, their object or their tradition. Really listening attentively, giving somebody your full attention, I think is kind of a gift, to have somebody really listen to you and hear your story. And that's the kind of spirit that we try and bring to this with students in classrooms. Wow, I'm just scrolling down. There are fantastic things here. Great. What I'm going to do now, before we move on and have a look at what students posted, is to kind of do its initial simulation, shall I say, of the dialogue toolkit. Shawnee, could you post that Padlet in the chat for people? Because I think it's going to be, I could do it, but it might be quicker if you do it. We're going to post a Padlet in the chat, which has some moves. And I want you at this point just to look at the first two columns. Actually, I'm now going to, hang on, let me try and come back in here and share my screen again with you. Oops, okay, of course it's gone back to the start for some unknown reason. Back. All right, here we are. If you're able to get into this Padlet, I'm introducing two of the dialogue moves that I'll be explaining more fully in a moment. So as you've been reading through other people's very brief descriptions, obviously your students would have more time and could do something more elaborate and take photographs and upload them, etc. I'm going to invite you to think, what's something that you noticed or found interesting about what somebody shared in the chat? Or was there a connection you made there? Did you make a connection between something that was shared or your own experiences, feelings, or interests? And the reason I'm going to ask you to do it in this Padlet is it will kind of organize it a bit by the different move, and we're going to look at some others. And then I can obviously share the Padlet with you for later for reference, whereas, you know, the chat's a little bit more awkward. So if people could have a look at that Padlet and have a go at and leaving a noticing or a connection for something that you just read in the chat. So something that somebody else posted. And I will switch to here and have a look at what's coming up. Having a few little issues with my I'm just going to stop share so I can actually look at what you're doing. My other computer is playing up here, I see. Okay, great. People are noticing that people, yeah, I noticed that people were very quick to jump in. And I found, I've done this kind of work in one way or another for a number of years now, including when I did my dissertation, actually, which was about how young people connect history or the past to their own lives and identities. I found that young people are usually quite eager to share their history or heritage. A lot about food. Personal, emotional. Oh, great. We've got visuals here. Great. Yeah, food, family heirlooms. The simplicity of the items chosen. So that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. nostalgia. Great. Now that's an interesting that we can glean information about people's families based on the items they chose. And yeah, I think this intercultural aspect of the work is really interesting, and it puts young people in the driving seat about what they want to share or not, especially in an online situation where you don't actually know you don't have a photograph of somebody to make a quick judgment about them, and you don't actually know them personally. Great. Related to family. Great. And then in terms of connection, emotional connections. Yes, other people feeling, oh yeah, I would have liked to have done that. Oh, and then here's a specific one about the greeting cards with handwriting from relatives. People having the same thing like the Disney coupon books. Great. Yes, foods. Yeah, I'm remembering now this. We seem to have quite a lot of participants from Florida. Fun fact, I grew up in a very small place in England next to the biggest theme park in England called Alton Towers. And I had a free pass to the theme park, but it's very, very small compared to Disney, but it's big for the UK. Great. Great. So I think we've all, okay, people are going over to the other columns. That's fine, but if you could just press pause on that, because I'm now going to share some other slides with you. Okay, I am now going to go back in. Right, and we'll hope. Okay, good. It's keeping us where we were. Oh, no, it's not. I'm not. All right. Do people see? Are people back in the PowerPoint? I just want to check. Yes, Shauna?
We see your Padlet.
Oh, you're not seeing this slide? Okay, that's not good. Let me stop share and go back in. Because I've got some beautiful pictures to share. All right. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this slide here just shows some of the array of things that we've seen students. They can range from, oh, on the top left, because we've had participants from Latvia or the former Soviet Union. These are medals from, like given out to workers in Soviet times, pictures from the war. That bottom left is from Italy, actually. We've got like artifacts like watches, food, dresses, spoons. Now you see the iPhone, that might not look old to you, but to some of our students, technology that seems very recent to us is actually a historical artifact. So that's very interesting in terms of conversations that can come up about technology. So that gives you a bit of a sense. These are all ones I've just, pulled off from our platform. And then Everardo and I, in preparation for this, and this is not something we've done before, we thought, well, it feels like there are certain like archetypes or, themes that we see coming up a lot. And interestingly, some of these came up, just now, you jumped right on it. Students love to share food traditions and rituals, like how they celebrate Christmas, for example, if that's their tradition, or if it's another tradition, how they celebrate that. Food, they're very eager to share their grandparents' recipes. We get lots of photographs of handwritten recipes and the food. And you can see there in bold, this student from Massachusetts is saying, I believe that food can be a great way to remember the past, since you can enjoy the same dish that people in your family ate years ago. So young people really feeling, I think as we all do, especially in the evening, if some of you haven't eaten dinner, that can really bring people together. We do have young people sharing treasured family objects, but they're not always treasure. Here we have shown a coin from Romania that's got King Cedric on it, I believe. But others, it might be a farming implement or kind of a simple everyday object that nevertheless has stayed in the family. And again, for young people, it feels very emotional and resonant, like kind of being in touch with other relatives. Other people, it's more about sharing information because they're interested in history. I'll say that this type is a bit less common, but if you're sharing something from the past that, it's a period that interests you, or you want to educate young people about the war, like, for example, when I say the war, I was referring there to the Second World War. somebody who had like the ration book, for example, the student might take it and then use that as an opportunity to let other kids know about that. And then in the fourth column, some young people really, and understandably, they're teenagers grappling with who they are in the world and what it means to be who they are. In this case, we pulled an example where they're talking about language and what it says about heritage. But oftentimes they want to talk about their family migrating, for example, or having blended families where they've got multiple traditions coming in. And so that's another common theme that we see on the platform. Right. Now, I'm going to invite you to take a closer look at a specific piece of student work and to take a closer look at this dialogue toolkit that many teachers have found useful for their everyday practice, regardless of whether they're teaching history or social studies. Now, a word about this dialogue toolkit. So our platform, it is a kind of a social media-like look to it in that kids get instructions, they follow the instructions, they post on the platform, and then young people leave comments for one another. Maybe at the end, I haven't got it on the slide deck, but I can pull up an example so that you can see what that looks like. Now, in the early days of the platform, we were finding that the comments that young people were leaving for one another seemed very thin, like they'd say things like, "Oh, great job, nice post." But then when we interviewed them or did surveys, because we are researchers at Project Zero, the thoughtfulness of their answers was not being reflected on the dialogue that we were seeing online. Project Zero, where I work, is known for thinking routines, which are light structures. And I think one of the books is by my colleague Ron that features a lot of thinking routines that Shauna was showing for the raffle. So using that and working with a classroom teacher in Utah called Chris Sloan, we developed what we call the dialogue toolkit, which are very simple, light moves that we offer to young people to try and help them get an online conversation started. But I will say that we've heard from classroom teachers that keeping these icons handy and using them in real time in the classroom is also very effective. And when young people come to post a comment on our platform, as they mouse over these icons, kind of the instructions pop up. So there are a few there. The snip one, which we won't try now because you kind of need to kind of be online. I guess we could do it. That is surprisingly effective, where the idea is you snip one sentence from another student's post, copy it into the comment chat, and then talk about why you picked that sentence or not. And it goes a lot further than, you know, a thumbs up that you might get on social media. And you'll even see we do have a thumbs up icon there, but the appreciate button is beyond saying good job. The idea is you say specifically what it is that you appreciate about the post that you've just read. The three on the far right, point of view, kind of pushing back, and naming, we developed those for kind of when you're getting into conversations where you want to have a more critical debate. And they've actually been really helpful to make kids feel bolder about not offending somebody by naming, well, my experience or where I'm standing from, this is what I think, which kind of reduces the tendency we found for making it sound like my truth is everybody's truth, which runs a greater risk of offending. And giving young people a chance to see that there may be different perspectives, viewpoints, life experiences is something that we're interested in. So I'm going to, if Everardo was here, we'd be teeing off from each other, but I'll just, because you're stuck in a webinar, I'll read this to you. This is a post I've chosen from Chiapas in Mexico. So this was a class taking part. It's a small rural town, and a boy called Beto, he did the activity that you just did the thought experiment with, and he chose to share this metate. So he writes, the object in the image is called metate. It is a traditional kitchen utensil that was used very frequently many years ago. This metate is very special because it's part of a family tradition. The tradition consists of giving this metate to one of the daughters of the family. For example, my grandmother, who's the one who keeps this metate, it was inherited from her mother, and also the mother of my grandmother's mother inherited it from my grandmother's mother. This metate is approximately more than 200 years old and has been preserved from generation to generation. Although it may seem like a simple old-fashioned kitchen utensil, it reminds us of our past as a family. I also want to note that this classroom that participated in Chiapas had never had any experience of communicating with kids from the US or other parts of the world. And although they were learning some English, the translation tools have got very good these days. So this was undoubtedly composed with the help of Google Translate. And we actually did interviews with the students from this class in Spanish with Everardo leading it. So I just say that because it's my understanding from Shauna that some of you have students who are English language learners. So although the English may seem here very good, I'm just saying that many people, of the young people who take part in this, are not necessarily fluently conversationally. All right. I'm now going to ask you to go back to the Padlet that you were in and kind of go over to those other columns. I know that we have some appreciations in there. That's fine. If we go down below. And I want you to imagine, you can be yourself. You don't have to pretend to be a teenage student in Beto's class or his learning group. What might you say to Beto? You can choose here. You might choose to give an appreciation for something you liked about his post. You might probe or ask questions to try and understand his perspective or experience a little better. Or you might use the extend and describe how this gave you some new ideas or a new perspective. So I'm going to invite you to do that. And then we'll take a look at some real dialogue that happened in response to Beto. I'm seeing some questions come in for Beto about who uses it most in the house now. There's something similar in the US. Somebody says in extend, his post made me realize how important it could be to my children and their children and so forth to pass important items down. Interesting insight. I have to admit, I'm having some trouble here with reading the ones that go down below for some reason tonight. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to look at this later. So I'll invite you to read down and see what people are posting, because I, for some reason, am having trouble with this Padlet today. Okay. People, one more moment to post. One I can read because it's kind of within my screen, is liking the appreciation of family. All right, and let's take a look at what actually was posted. Let me just go back and then share my screen. Okay. So a student from Massachusetts who was in the walking party or the learning group writes back to Beto. That's so amazing that the metate has been passed down in your family for more than 200 generations, double exclamation mark. It must mean a lot to know that it's still in good shape. I really like that all the women in your family are connected over a simple kitchen utensil, but in your family, it is really a meaningful object. You stated, and here we can see the snip that I mentioned before, my grandmother, who is the one who keeps the metate, when will your mother inherit the metate? I also saw a post from another student who has inherited a ring from her grandmother and mother. Her family has not been passing it down as long as your family. I also have been given a necklace just like both of you. I think it's very cool that we all come from different places in the world and we all can connect over the same tradition. You said that the metate, traditional kitchen utensil, used very frequently, what was it used for? Is there something similar but more advanced now? Now, I think we can see in this post, there's quite a few of these dialogue tools going on at the same time. We see a copying and pasting some things that are interesting. We see questions, we see an appreciation. And also there's clear evidence that the students been browsing through and looking at what other students have been posting, kind of making a connection as well. So let's see what Beto replies. Beto replies, I'm glad you're interested in the history of the metate and the role it plays in my family history. The metate is very significant. My grandmother keeps it very well. She even hesitated to give it to me so I could photograph it. Unfortunately, this tradition no longer followed. My grandmother was the last to keep and inherit the metate. She says that before the metate was inherited for the purpose of using it, but now it's not used, there's no point in inheriting it. To somebody's comment earlier, maybe she could be wrong on that, given her grandson's greater interest in it. He carries on, this is why my grandmother still has the metate, did not want to inherit it. It's used to grind food, corn and cocoa, but today it has been replaced by blenders and electric grinders. I find your observation interesting regarding that despite being from different places, our families have followed the same traditional dynamic of inheriting objects in order to remember them. It seems as if inheriting objects was a very common way of remembering the ancestors. So we see there, he's providing answers, but he's also moving the conversation forward by making a comment about what he's noticing and building on her observation that there seem to be similar posts cropping up. And then same student replies, thanks for your reply. I find it sad that modern day kitchen utensils have to stop your family's long tradition. I'm also very interested that we can connect from far away. Again, thank you for your response. There were other threads as well, but for the sake of time, I'll kind of leave it at that. So I think you can see there that it's a very, very simple activity that I've just shared with you. And even the dialogue moves are simple. But when we interview kids after they've done something like this, they express a great interest in learning about other people's lives. I think there's a natural curiosity that most students have. But also they like and they're happy to share something of their own and to kind of have what feels like a meaningful dialogue. I just share these pictures to show we've had teachers, kind of make posters. One's in Greek there, I think, and one's in Spanish. And we do have a blog that I can share out. Actually, I'm not sure I have the link to hand, but it's called 6 Dialogue Moves, where we've spoken with teachers about how they've taken the dialogue toolkit and used it for different purposes. Before we switch to Q&A, because I see the time's coming up, I also want to do a bit of a reality check on this. So although I'd say this this curriculum has been really successful, from this students go on to consider controversies in the past. They don't have to, but they can, and think about how the past is remembered. And we've had some really rich conversations. If you were to sign up for for this learning journey, I was looking at some, we've just kicked off on some new ones, and they started in September, and it can be uneven. So there's some groups, there's already great dialogue going on, others it feels very slow. So because we're just grouping people who sign up and going for it, there's a certain unpredictability to this. If you're doing our program, obviously, if you're managing these activities in your classroom, you're much more in control about how it plays down and the pacing of it. But on our platform, not everybody gets a comment, and sometimes it can be like a very long post. Somebody spent time, and for whatever reason, the students have chosen to leave comments on others. Sometimes students, when they're teaching each other, you're like, I may not know the exact history that you're referring to, but sometimes I'll put in factual inaccuracies that we do notice. And what do we do about that? So I certainly not recommending this to replace your knowledge as teachers or history textbooks. Sometimes as well, there's a bit of a lack of critical engagement, to my mind, from the way I was taught how to teach history. So sometimes it feels like dominant narratives of the past are just put in without thinking, or, for example, if a student thinks their community hasn't been represented in the past, they switch that out for their narrative, but again, are not necessarily thinking about how many people would agree with this perspective, where might there be disagreement. Sometimes students, we would call it play it safe. They don't want to offend anybody, which I think is kind of actually quite noble, especially when it's an intercultural exchange platform. But students have reflected afterwards, they felt that the conversation could have been more critical or have gone further, but it felt like the students are being very careful to be nice to one another. And then what I've found, and it's very interesting to me, if you've got classrooms participating, say, from Mexico, America, in this case, in this Beto's example from India, they have different history teaching traditions. So what young people think the reason is for doing this or what's going on may be quite different, and that can lead to some great richness, but also some puzzles. And I certainly wouldn't evaluate everybody's work in the same metric. I think it's very much up to the classroom teacher to determine how would you evaluate this work, why are we doing it, what makes sense. But I just want to, before the question, leave with some quotes this is from Beto's group. One student from India said he liked this program because it gave freedom to us to say our opinions. We're very grateful. This is called being democratic. And we like it because it's fair. They were able to share what it was like to live in rural India, for example, something that they noticed would never normally get included in textbooks that, are more about the leaders and wealthier people. Marita, who was a classmate of Beto, said, thanks to this course, I was able to talk a little more with my family and know where I came from. I think I learned, for example, why my community is the way it is now. But you don't have to get caught up in yourself or your country. You have to investigate further because there are many things you share with other countries. It opens your mind to other worlds and stories. And then classmate from Massachusetts said, since there were a lot of schools from different countries, it wasn't just white history that was being talked about. It was history from all across the world. And I mean, this is from a Massachusetts critical stance, but she herself actually was not a white student, talking about how, up for debate, whether history curriculum kind of trends to certain communities and not others. Right. So I'd love to invite you to share something in the chat, questions that you have for me now, something that intrigued you about what I've just shared that you might try out in your own classroom or educational setting. I'll leave this up for a moment and then I'll get off it so I can have a look at your comments and go into and talk with you.
Thank you so much. Joanna has a question on the typical age group that you work with doing this project.
Yeah, so it was designed for middle and high school students. Beto, whose work I shared, I believe he was 15. But so it's a range of ages. But on our actual platform, in case anybody teaches younger, we have learning journeys or experiences for kids aged 3 to 18. So across up to the end of high school. Yeah. So I can look at the chat.
And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type those either in the Q&A box or in the chat. We'll find them.
I'm seeing some things that people say that they like giving young people a chance to discover histories they wouldn't otherwise. I'll just add to that, actually, that's a big attraction of Out of Eden Learn, the platform in general, because young people feel that they're getting privileged information from a real live person who's sharing their experiences. And we hear from them that they love that. And also, I mean, sometimes we have to be careful, and we've got other tools for making sure they don't get too confident that they know what life is like in China, for example. But they love the immediacy of that.
Thank you. Trisha asked a really great question. What was the process of developing the platform?
Yeah, that's great. So the story of how this came to be is like crazy, actually. So I was a history teacher, then I worked at Project Zero, and then I did my dissertation, which was about young people connecting to the past. And then I had a pilot curriculum connecting classrooms in Canada, Australia, and the US, because I could see that young people really wanted these spaces to share their personal connections to the past. And then Paul Salopek, the journalist, happened to be at Harvard for 3 months. He had a Nieman Fellowship for journalists to plan his walk around the world. And he reached out to us at Project Zero, because I guess he'd heard about us, to see if anybody was interested in doing something educational. Because I guess if you think you're going to walk for years, you might as well be walking for multiple purposes. And then we found synergy there between this idea of slowing down, listening to stories. And it just started, actually, if any of you are familiar with Edmodo, we used that platform initially for a very small pilot with classrooms where we had contacts. And kids loved it so much that the funder who was supporting us, we were very lucky, he gave us the money to work with a web developer to develop the platform. And then we've taken this very iterative approach. So what you see now has taken years to really kind of get the curriculum right, to get the tools right, etc. And we're still evolving it. So it's serendipity, but also kind of years of really looking, what does thoughtful intercultural or peer-to-peer exchange look like in this space? So somebody else I see knows Edmodo. That was quite clunky, I will say, for our purposes, because you had to keep scrolling forever to find comments. Now we have a face where you can have favorites, you can quickly find posts you want to look at. Yeah.
Great. I think we have time for a couple more quick questions. To access the platform, does each student need a login, or is it a teacher creating a single login because of privacy laws and things like this?
Well, I might say, Sean, if you wouldn't mind posting in those, you know, in the last square, the different resources that I have, some of the answers might be there. But you would create, you would go, if you wanted to try this out, you create an account as an educator, and then very importantly, you have to add a class. And then when you add a class, and we've put the parties together, so you have to, we won't be doing this now till late January, if you want to try it out. Because we have to wait for people to sign in. It's a whole process. Then you will get one code that everybody, all the students in your class, use to get into the space. And then they create their own profile. They pick an avatar of their choice, but not their photograph. They create a pseudonym, and then they can very independently go in there. We do monitor the space every day. There's a flag comments. We have very few problems, though, because they know that teachers and people at Harvard are looking at what's going in. But we have those features. But yeah, if you were interested, you could even sign up today, but we wouldn't put you in a learning group until late January, which will be the next time we found is a good timing to get people from around the world to do this. Right now, we've got some very interesting history classrooms from Cyprus. I think we've got Peru, Mexico are doing it again. Yeah, I'm not quite, we have countries from around the world basically in real time now doing this curriculum.
And Joanna has another great question. Can the teams be created around a certain topic like government?
Well, that's interesting. So you can, when you sign up, say, I would say that you'd really like to be with another classroom, but we don't know who's going to sign up. So it would be best if you got a friend to sign up with you. And then when you sign up, you say, can we be together? Because we want to explore this in our curriculum. But then our curricula that we've got on offer, we've got this history one, we've got one on stories of human migration, which is actually very popular with history and social studies teachers. There's one on planetary health, so more environmental. And then we've got, we call the foundational ones, which are more about looking for signs of history and global forces, or practicing slowing down and interviewing, etc. They're designed to be flexible enough so they're not content curriculum specific, because we need it to be flexible enough that a teacher in a totally different country with different standards could also fit it into their curriculum and make it work for them. So we don't like have a government curriculum as such, but we could pair you, if you helped us, with other classrooms who are following the same curriculum. So you could maybe then direct the kids. And then the other thing is you can just take and adapt any of our free curriculum to adapt it for an activity that would make sense in your classroom.
Thank you so much, Liz. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I know there were more questions that we didn't quite get to, and I'm sure if you'd like to reach out to Liz directly, she'd be happy to answer some of those questions for you. But what a great resource. We already live and teach in a very multicultural community, and this is great. So I did want to share our winners, and I just picked these randomly. So this is Liz's book, and the winner of that is Brooke White. So congratulations to Brooke. And the other book I have here is The Power of Making Thinking Visible, another product that came out of Harvard's Project Zero, and that goes to Tina Hefner. And when you registered, I have your address. So our first winner is Brooke White, and our second winner is Tina Hefner. So thank you all so much for being here. You can get them on Amazon, unless it would be better to go through your publisher, Liz. What are your thoughts?
And I'll just note so that people aren't surprised when they see the book. I actually run a different strand of research. So that book in question is about innovating in the classroom. It's more about professional development. Yeah, so it's not actually about what I've just spoken about. But if in the chat you saw, if you sign up there with your name, the book that's coming out soon is actually going to be free, because we just want it to be available to classrooms around the world in a PDF format. So that's not ready yet, but it will be coming soon, the Open Canopy. And if you go to the Project Zero website, I've just put my email in the chat. Please reach out to me. And Out of Eden Learn, you can just Google it and get straight to our platform. So you're all amazing. You just jumped right in and got on it on an evening after teaching. So you're all amazing. So thanks for the work that you do and for the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much again. If you have participated, you'll receive an email in about 24 hours, I think, saying that you were here, and we give you 3 hours of PD for the session. So there will be some associated reading. I'm sure some of you are already down a rabbit hole into the reading and looking at Project Zero. So thank you again. And I will look forward to seeing Project Lead and Project Epic members in November for our next workshop with the Right Question Institute. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great night.
Bye. Bye.